Anytime Frank Ocean reminds us that he's alive, people start foaming at the mouth in anticipation for new music. With Frank, people are thirsty for any morsel of information that they can get. So in 2021, the internet was starting to buzz because he trademarked the phrase Homer. There were rumors going around that it was for some kind of clothing, potentially something higher end. A few months later, in August 2021, we would get the official reveal. Homer is a jewelry company. They launched with a few pendants in the couple hundreds of dollars range, and they've gone on to produce all sorts of stuff, including this one-of-one necklace that Drake bought for almost $2 million. And if you're looking for something a little bit cheaper, there's a $25,000 cock ring. Anyway, as a diehard Frank Ocean fan myself, I was ready to buy anything. But as a musician and a substitute teacher, I wasn't exactly rolling in cash. In 2021, when the brand launched, I had actually just sold out a show in New York at the Mercury Lounge, so I had a little bit of cash and I took it directly to the Homer store. I had to go get my pendant and get myself right. Hold on, I forgot to wear it. Let me go get it. Alright, here it is. Before I bought it in person, I browsed the website like everybody else to see which one I was going to want. But what really caught the attention of me and many others on that website was the soundtrack. The Homer website featured a playlist that some at first might have mistook for new Frank music, but it was actually the album For Real by a rapper named 454. Or 454. It seems kind of interchangeable. The first thing you hear on the intro to the album, Late Night, is a sped up sample of Brent Faiyaz's song Been Away. Then some pitched up rap vocals come in for a second, and then before you know it, the beat just explodes. And from that moment on, there's almost 45 minutes of pure bliss on that website soundtrack. Before 454 found himself getting one of the most valuable cosigns you can get, he had already lived a couple lifetimes as a creative, achieving things that now look like cool side quests when compared to his burgeoning rap career. As a producer, he's done songs with Playboi Carti, and as a skateboarder, he has multiple videos with the legendary magazine Transworld. But before all that, Willie Wilson was a kid in Longwood, Florida, which is a suburb of Orlando. He lived with his parents and his sister, fellow rapper Pig the Gemini. His rap name actually comes from the Chevrolet Caprice that his father used to drive. It was his dad's baby, and he went in and put in a 454 big block engine. I don't know that much about cars, but I feel like I've learned a lot from this video because every time you Google 454, there's people trying to sell that car part. He told NME that as a kid, he loved the sound that Chevy made when it started. He said there was something about it that was just kind of monstrous. So he became Lil 454, and the name kind of stuck with him from there. Sadly, his childhood took a dark turn at 11 years old when his father was shot. He survived, but the family was living with eyes in the back of their heads. They even moved houses in an attempt to stay safe. Things were a little weird, he told Dazed magazine. Like very paranoid. We felt like we had to watch our back. A year later, his father was shot again, and unfortunately he didn't survive. He told the Dazed interviewer Sam Davies about how hard that hit him as a child. Even today, he said, I guess you can say I'm struggling with it. But with the music, I try to kind of talk about it because I don't really be open much about that. But the music definitely helps. Listening back to Late Night, you hear it in the lyrics. Peace and blessings to my family up in heaven, lost a couple few. I lost my pops in 2009, my heart that shit cut right through. And in the next line, you hear him address the same paranoia that he told Dazed about. My people, you ain't blind. Open your eyes, see what we're going through. I'm peeping through the blinds just to make sure no one followed you. The image created by the following lyrics, creep on the late night, shorty she gon' call me on the late night, are more vibey and positive. Like even as I read them, I'm trying not to sing them in the voice that I know they sound like. It's like hanging out with a crush and going for a late night drive. But when you read the full lyric, world get creep on the late night. With the context of those lines before it, you start to see the colorful and bouncy production as more of a shield, a deliberate rejection of the dark path that someone who experienced what he did at such a young age may wander down afterward. But I'm jumping too far ahead by going to the Late Night album. A lot had to happen for 454 before he was in a place to make a project like that. And before we get into all that, if you like videos about music like this one, I would really appreciate a like and subscribe. I try to post a video every week, and if you want to see them early, go to my Instagram, HADJI Gaviota, throw me a follow on there, join my broadcast channel. I'll post a link to every video I do one day early in there. Also, I have a song coming out. It's called Was It Ever Really Like That? Drops at midnight if you're watching this the day that it comes out, and if you're watching this after, it's already out. But for those of y'all who are watching it early, because I appreciate you guys, I actually put the unlisted music video link in the description. So feel free to check that out. If you like the instrumental playing in the background right now, it's from that song, so that should give you an idea. Alright, back to the video. Young Willie spent a year in virtual school after losing his father, and the outlet he chose for himself was skating. He told Rolling Stone in 2021, I didn't really know how to deal with it, so I was just skating a bunch around at that time. He wasn't just aimlessly floating around on his board though. Willie was really good. Here's a video of him in 2012. when he would have been 15 or 16. He has a lyric in a song where he says something along the lines of, "I was born in 1996, so don't put me with Generation Z." So he would have been about 15 or 16. It was shot by Tommy Bond, who you can find on social media under the name Bontaname Candy, and we'll see a lot of him in this video. He still does all of 454's graphics and videos to this day, but at this time, he was shooting skate vids. A couple years later, we see Willie return to Transworld's YouTube channel when he's 19 or 20 years old. It was around this time that he was also messing with music, mostly in a group that also included his sister Pig. He had been messing around on FL Studio for a few years at that point. He produced under the name Squills, which is his Instagram handle to this day, except back then, it was stylized with V's and X's in a very mid-2010s SoundCloud Florida way. His YouTube beat channel is actually still up, and he put a beat on there like in February of this year, so it's actually kind of active. The beat channel itself had enough of a following that some people in the comments don't even know that he's 454. He had a huge placement from here too. He produced a song called Young Zanho by a rapper named Sir Cartier, which you might not recognize that name, but a couple years later he renamed himself Playboy Carti. The Young Zanho beat samples the startup sound from the PS2, an instant source of nostalgia for 90s babies like Willie, Carti, me, and maybe you watching at home. In fact, the original beat that he posted on YouTube is still up in its original uploaded form. Willie himself started rapping around 2016 or 2017, although he told Rolling Stone, "I was just doing little songs for the homies, just little skate songs or whatever." The earliest music that I can find with Willie's vocals on them is from 2018, on the Bontaname Candy SoundCloud page. On May 1st, 2018, he dropped an EP called Gatorland. It's a little rough around the edges, not particularly well mixed, although that was also just kind of the vibe in 2018, especially on SoundCloud. Vans Pro would have definitely gotten a like from me back then. It was this year in 2018 when he took the step that would alter the path of his career forever, and he moved with his friends and his girlfriend to New York. They didn't move for a particular reason, they were just kind of looking for a change of scenery, maybe just to stay for 6 months or so. And it was along with some friends that he had met from skating. But it was New York that would really lead him to developing his sound and turning music from a hobby into a full-time creative artistic output. He had the desired New York transplant path written out for him when he got a job at Alife, a streetwear store that closed back in 2021. But this was a historic place. Anyone in New York in the streetwear scene knows what Alife is. There is rarely a better way to engrave yourself in New York's underground arts culture than getting a job at a store like Alife. Kid Cudi famously moved from Cleveland to New York to fold jeans at the Bape store before his music career got poppin'. It's a journey well documented by the 2010 HBO series How to Make It in America, where the two main characters are trying to get their streetwear brand off the ground. And funny enough, Kid Cudi stars in that. Probably not a coincidence. But knowing skaters, having sick production credits, and having an amazing creative partner in Tommy Bond, or Bontaname Candy, was all the groundwork that Willie needed for 454 to really start taking off. In 2019, he gave us 2 projects as Lil 454. First up was the 14K mixtape in January 2019. He sounded inspired by Playboy Carti vocally, and by Pierre Bourne production-wise. It was hard not to be in 2018 or 2019 after we got the Die Lit album, which to me is a classic. Argue with your mama. He still possessed a particular sing-songiness that you wouldn't really get from Carti that much, so it stood out in its own way. Bossolini is a song that ended up getting repurposed for a tape later called Fast Tracks 1, which we'll get to. There are some other good inspirations on here though. Retrograde sounds like something made by somebody who loves Houston, and 454 hasn't been shy about his love for chopped and screwed music. We're going to see him playing a lot with speeding up and slowing things down later. He gave us an EP in October of 2019 as well called Big Block, and he kept us fed with singles throughout 2020, including Late Night in July. It would end up being the 2021 album's intro. It's the oldest video on the 454 YouTube channel, and he added a few more loosies throughout the year, all with videos that aren't on streaming services. Interstate Vibe, Quick Scheme, and For Life. Of these, I think Interstate Vibe is my favorite. If you're only familiar with his stuff on streaming services, I highly recommend checking out all these 3. And honestly, he has so much music scattered out that it's really worth a dive. In August of 2020, he dropped the first part of the Fast Tracks series. It's an archive of music that he had worked on from 2018 to 2020, but it's all in one track on SoundCloud like a DJ mix, and it's sped up and slowed down and transitioned together in a way that honors the long lineage of Florida's fast music. Fast music is a subgenre that came out of Broward County, Florida in the 1990s. A Miami area radio DJ named DJ Nasty did an interview with The Fader about fast music in 2017. According to him, the origin is that DJs wanted popular rap songs to be able to fit in their sets next to the faster Miami bass music. And so a whole subculture was born out of taking those rap hits and speeding them up. You can hear the influence that fast music had on 454 in developing his signature sound. He loves both the slowed down, chopped up Houston music and also the sped up fast Florida music. Really makes him some kind of like time mage when it comes to his music. He's constantly playing with speeding up and slowing down, almost like a really experienced NASCAR driver. And so with Fast Tracks, we see his first explicit entry into that world. And for the first time in his music, he was really messing with changing speeds. 454 credits his move to New York with broadening his horizons. He told NME, "New York is the mecca of hip hop. I feel like living there really made me go back and do my research into the legends. I feel I try to find that spark of what makes them work and incorporate it into my own style. I personally can hear it on the song Evisu, where he uses the same sample as Jay-Z's Dead Presidents. There is nothing more New York than coming to appreciate those old samples. It's such like a saturated sample too. I mean, Jay-Z himself rapped on it twice with Dead Presidents and Dead Presidents 2, and then J. Cole rapped on it as well on the warm-up. But because 454's style is so alien, it feels so new and unique, yet familiar at the same time because of that sample. It's something we may have never gotten without that move to New York. That's not to say 454 had a narrow musical influence growing up. His parents got him a Bone Thugs and Harmony Greatest Hits album when he was 6 years old that he identifies with changing his life. He told Office Mag that the New Orleans rapper Currency became one of his favorites after stumbling into his music on the internet. Like most kids coming to age in the 2000s, he would hop on LimeWire and download music from random bands from the 60s and 70s. Skateboarding video games and Cartoon Network TV shows would broaden his horizons as well, and he specifically credits the video game Grand Theft Auto 3 with introducing him to the genre of jungle, which is a 1990s fast-paced drum and bass genre. With all these sources of inspiration coming at every turn, it's no wonder that 454 and other kids born in the later half of the 90s often make music that sounds like it's pulling from 3 different worlds at once. All of this influence, work, and momentum built up to the release of his first album, For Real, on March 16th, 2021. A lot of people learned about this project when Frank made it the soundtrack for the Homer website, but it had been out for almost 6 months at that point. In fact, he had already been interviewed by Rolling Stone, a pretty big accomplishment for an independent artist, a few months before the website launched. On top of that, his single FaceTime was premiered by The Fader before For Real even came out in January 2021. So while the Frank cosign obviously helped, it's not like 454 wasn't building his own momentum. It was actually in 2020 when he first got connected to Frank, according to what he told NME. He described the link in detail, so we should just look at what he said. The collaboration was a pretty long process. I got in touch with someone from his camp in 2020, right around the time I dropped Late Night. We chopped it up about different stuff. I sent them some tracks off For Real, the upcoming album, and a couple demos to listen to. A couple months go by, and Frank's team contacted me regarding a shoot in London, but sadly, I couldn't go. Fast forward a couple months later, and I get another call and they're like, "Yo, we're about to launch the Homer site, and Frank wants to use your project." I gave him the green light. He also told Office Magazine that he didn't fully understand what Frank's team meant when they asked to use his music. He said, "I thought they just wanted to throw a song up there with a lot of other different artists. It must have been a really surreal feeling to load up that page and see your whole album up there," especially since he told Dazed that he hadn't actually heard anything from him after the album dropped. Clearly, Frank was a fan. It goes to show that you never really know who's listening. Let's talk about For Real. This album is so much more hi-fi and more clean sounding than the stuff on his SoundCloud. It's colorful and catchy with a lot of low end to make sure it sounds crazy on any sound system. It does sometimes feel like it's perfect to throw on in a car, but I feel like I would enjoy it like if I just turned my GameCube on and played Mario Kart Double Dash, or even if I just like turned the lights off and stared at a fish tank. But the car really feels like the home for a project like this, and now knowing the origin of 454's name, it just makes so much more sense. If you're a fan of the world that Frank Ocean creates when he plays with some faster flows bordering on rap, you could take a song like Provider and just imagine if you smashed hella loud 808s on it. It all sounds so positive and colorful. This one meme of the dolphin really just does more than any words I can come up with for describing 454's sound. One of the tropes on For Real that sticks out for a lot of people is the switching of speeds. Songs like Late Night, FaceTime, Pisces, and Andretti all start sped up and pitched up before dropping into something like their natural recorded tempo, or maybe even something a little slower than that. It may sound like something that would get old, but it genuinely doesn't. It's hard to say why it works so well. It's probably because it doesn't just sound tacked on like a lot of outros do. It sounds like something that means something. A cynical person could point at the rise in popularity of sped up songs on TikTok, but someone with a better understanding of the cultural cachet that 454 is working with would understand it's more of a loving reference to DJ Screw and Florida fast music than it is anything more cynical like that. If he sees a benefit from the boom in sped up music, then he just happened to be in the right place at the right time. My favorite song on the album has changed a couple times, but right now it's the aptly titled Florida. It samples the 1994 song If the Lovin' Ain't Good by Jade, an R&B girl trio. The song only has 100,000 streams on Spotify, like the original sample, although the band did have a hit in the 90s with Don't Walk Away. There is something about songs with really pretty soul samples and then loud ass 808s that will just always appeal to me. The contrast it creates is always going to be cool. It reminds me a bit of the song Low Key by fellow Florida rapper Seddy Hendrinx, which samples Weak by SWV. Although that's a super recognizable sample, and this Jade song I had never heard before the 454 album. He quickly followed up For Real with Fast Tracks 2, the sequel to the one-track SoundCloud mixtape. It's in the same format as well, although people on the internet liked it so much that some went on and split it up into individual tracks so that people can save certain songs to playlists and whatnot. This builds off the momentum in the world of the first Fast Tracks, with even more cool transitions, random tags, and a general mixtape vibe that felt sorely lacking at a time when it felt like most artists would be optimizing their stuff for DSPs like Spotify or Apple Music. Part of the benefit in leaving a lot of your catalog on SoundCloud and YouTube is that it allows you to play with unclearable samples, like the one he opens up with on Double Dutch, which uses the outro of Drake's song Fancy from Thank Me Later. His sister Pig shows up for a few features, including a remix of the standout from For Real, FaceTime. As the cosigns started to pile and his fame started to grow, 454 kept us consistently fed throughout 2021 and 2022. He would drop Lucy's on YouTube, and for music videos for release songs, he would do two-parters, where he'd throw in a second song that he didn't post anywhere else onto the second half of the video. He did that for one of my favorite singles that he dropped in March 2022 called Skittles. The way he opens with the pitched up, auto-tuned, it sounds so childish, but in like the best way. It's like a nursery rhyme almost. It sounds like a kid making fun of you on the playground. And if that didn't catch you fully off guard, this random ass drum and bass fill just hits you out of nowhere, calling back to that inspiration he got from Grand Theft Auto 3, but the fill fits way more than you expect. And then for the finishing blow, he hits you with this super fast flow when his vocals come in, but it's also so melodic. March 2022 was a big month for 454 in general, because he had one of his first big features come out on the song Sanjuro with Denzel Curry. That's a real Florida link-up, and he told NME about it in their interview. Denzel has been an artist I've been watching for a minute now. He was someone I always wanted to work with. I got in touch with his manager, and they hit me up one day and told me to pull up. We headed over to Quad Recording Studios, the same place where Tupac got shot, and locked in some recording time. The end result was Sanjuro. It's some pure Florida shit, man. Fun fact, Quad Studios is where I recorded my first professional song, and guess what? That song was ass. But this song, Sanjuro, has some real Florida energy, especially with 454 opening the hook with the line, Sunshine State, with a great little life. I still see comments on all the 454 videos about how the Denzel feature was what put him onto them. So this is a big look. 2 months later, he dropped Skittles on streaming services as the B-side to another single, Thankful. Thankful was produced by two pretty big rap producers, Benny X and Dillip, and if you don't recognize Dillip's name, he's produced for a lot of artists like Juice WRLD. It's another example of the 454 industry network expanding, but he doesn't sound out of place on a song like Thankful. In fact, this is another one of my favorites from him. Amidst all this new work dropping, 454 was on tour with Amine on the Best Tour Ever tour to support his recent tape 2.5, along with Cochise and AJ Tracy. He'd finish off the year with what is his best project to me so far at least, and that's Fast Tracks 3. While the first two in the Fast Tracks series were SoundCloud exclusives that were all in one track, Fast Tracks 3 is an album with individual tracks, and it represents a huge step forward in 454's artistry. First off, the entire project is produced by him, with Dillip co-producing one song, Berry Punch. While he had produced big chunks of his work in the past, taking this all on at once is a big deal. And maybe one would expect if he's producing the whole thing, it might sound a little samey. But that really couldn't be further from the truth with Fast Tracks 3. The tempos change from song to song a lot, and not in the sense that they're slowed down and sped up the way that For Real was. Keep a Smile kicks things off with a lot of high energy, before going into one of my favorite songs, the slower and more thoughtful Ice Age. I got banned from playing this in the car with my girl, because I would just keep running it back so I could sing the opening line over and over again. Yeah, the way I rock this ice, you would've thought I was a penguin. The transition from Ice Age into track 3, Tales from the Hood, is super smooth, and it makes sense because the videos for the two songs are actually in one video together. Track 4, Stitch and Lilo, shows off how much 454's production skills have grown. First off, the sample of SZA singing during like an acoustic session is hella creative. I feel like I just gotta show you what it sounds like. But rather than make something super melodic out of that sample, like you might expect if you heard somebody was sampling SZA, he flips it into this crazy ass beat with loud bass. Also, the second line in the track, "Came out the swamp like a motherfucking gator," is like the ultimate 454 thesis statement, matching up perfectly with the Florida aura and the little gator cartoon character that you see across all his art that penguinnnn designed for him. I spent so much time on these first 4 tracks when this project came out that I actually didn't come around to appreciate the back half of this project until a little bit later. The biggest case of this was Love Me, Hate Me with his sister Pig the Gemini. Pig's chorus on this is maybe the most anthemic hook on anything 454 has done. I just want to belt it at the top of my lungs whenever I hear it, and I'm going to spare you guys, but you can imagine. And if that wasn't enough, her verse too is crazy. It's so crazy that it becomes the moment on the tape where he does what he did on For Real and he slows it down at the end and repeats it again. And her verse sounds totally placed in a new context at that slower tempo. It lets you take in some of the lines that might have gone right over your head if you were listening to the faster version. She said you a Gemini, ain't you, so you probably got 2 faces. Yeah, you right, I got 2 sides, but I'll show them to you, babe. It sounds better when she does it. In the Office Mag interview, he talked about his perspective on what he wants his music to sound like. Usually I think of it as a video game. I try to make colors. I don't know if this makes sense, but I try to make colors, or I try to make it sound like a certain color, or I try to make it sound bright, or just like a rainbow or something euphoric. I'm not like a lyrical person, so I try to bring a different perspective to it. And I think that just comes from being into cartoons and video games. I want to talk about that statement in 2 sections, but let's start with the colors. The first thing I think when I hear his music is color as well. I think it's the synths, many of which do sound like they're coming from a retro video game. It really does make sense that his music was chosen to represent the Homer brand. Look at the Homer piece that I have, or some of the others that they have on their site. The brand is all about these sharp colors. And not only does 454's musical approach reflect that in his crazy cartoonish vocals or the synths that he chooses, but his art style represents it as well. Look at the cover for Real. Although I don't think he did that cover, penguinnnn, or Tommy Bone, deserves a lot of credit for helping Willie figure out what 454 looks like as a brand. The gator character is so symbolic, and all the visuals they do together fit perfectly with what 454's music sounds like. Skating, hanging out with your friends, keeping your head high, staying out of trouble, but being prepared for it. And that's also where I want to touch on his lyrical content. I thought it's interesting that 454 says he's not a lyrical person. I understand what he means by this in a sense. At first, to be lyrical in hip-hop may have meant that you were telling these gritty, detailed stories like someone like Nas, or flooding the track with punchlines that are as clever as possible like Big L. As time rolled on, we've gotten so many new styles of lyricism, like the hashtag flow of the late 2000s and early 2010s, that's basically an evolution or a spin-off of the punchline rap, but now it's rocked by artists like Big Sean, Fabulous, or an early Drake. 454's music doesn't fit into any of those boxes, but I don't think that means he's not a lyricist. Sonically, he's super different from these artists I'm about to name, but I think of one of his biggest inspirations, Currency, or somebody like Larry June. It's lifestyle rap, and 454's lifestyle is skating, hanging out with his friends, driving fast cars, and being cool. The interviewer in the Dazed interview, Sam Davies, explicitly asked 454 what he thought the word cool meant. Cool is just anything that's original, man. Anything that's in its own lane. Genuine. That's really it. I wasn't really like a social person. I always liked my alone time. I didn't really go out and do much. So recently I just realized I was really on my individual, and I still am on occasion. You see bits and pieces of that individuality in his songs. On Ice Age, and I'm gonna stop myself from singing it in the voice, he says, "Yeah, don't let them boys influence how you're thinking. You're gonna die going down that route. Just let that sink in. I don't want that to be the case." On Tales of the Hood, he reiterates all that. "I live my life on a cool little strict though. Stay me, never change, gotta get dough." Sure, these aren't the most complex concepts with quintuple entendres, but my point is that they don't have to be for the song to mean something. And at the end of the day, isn't that what it means to be lyrical? What makes 454's music so beloved to so many people is that he really embodies the stuff that he's saying. And I see people in the comments on his videos like replying to people who say that he's different and kind of fighting back on it, but I think it's just kind of like a you get it or you don't situation. When he says the stuff he's saying, it comes off as genuine because it really feels like he's being himself. Tyler the Creator is another rapper who spends a lot of time telling his listenership to be themselves. And again, when he says it, it really resonates because it feels like he's living that. And it feels like he's been living that publicly for over a decade now. 454 just finished a tour of the United States with Mike and Neonte, the latter of whom he actually knew growing up from the Florida skating scene. Shout out to Eric the Young God for interviewing Neonte. That's a great interview, you should go watch that. It's interesting that 454's music can fit so well with someone like Mike, who is known for a more poetic approach to lyricism. But in the Venn diagram of their music, there's a pretty big overlap of listenership, and I think a big part of that has to do with the approach being kind of similar. They take different paths to get to the same place, which is all about personal growth, persevering through issues, while maintaining a positive attitude. This is why the work of 454 appeals to so many artists as well. When I call him your favorite artist, it's not just because that's the name of the series I'm doing on YouTube now. And it's not just because he has a big Frank Ocean cosign. When I saw 454 live at New Blue in New York City in September-ish of 2022, I recognized a ton of artists in the crowd. It felt a lot like the McGee show that I went to recently in LA, just a different scene. Usually when I go to shows in New York for a buzzing artist, I also see a lot of industry people, A&R types, suits, if you will. But in this case, the crowd seemed to be almost exclusively creatives. I don't love using that word, but it's a lot easier than listing everybody. But you know what I mean. Skaters, designers, graffiti artists, other visual artists. There's an ethos that comes with being a true, multidisciplinary creative. It's not just the music, it's the videos, the merch, like the collabs he's done with the New York streetwear brand Dybbuk, and the little gator guy. Artists tend to outsource a lot of this stuff, and sometimes it's to people who they don't necessarily know very well. They might be very talented artists, and sometimes they'll nail the assignment, but at the end of the day, nothing's gonna beat working with someone who genuinely knows and likes you and understands you. That's why 454's work and Tommy Bond's work go together so well. Tommy was filming those early skate videos. They've been working together for over a decade. His earliest music is on the Bontaname Candy SoundCloud page, because when it was uploaded, it was just two skater friends making music for their friends and themselves. It's beautiful that it's evolved into something with a big enough fan base to tour the world and make a living off of. And it's a testament to how good the art is that that's the case. But I get the feeling that they'd be making the same shit even if none of us were listening. And that's exactly why it's so cool. 454 has been active over the past year as well. On top of doing the tour with Mike and Niante, he dropped an EP with the New York collective Surf Gang last year called Fast 5, with Surf Gang members Evil Gianni and Ira jumping in and doing some of the production. Even though I think I prefer when 454 does it himself like he did on Fast Tracks 3, just because it really creates a very cohesive world. I'm just a fan of the brushstrokes that he paints with. I still thoroughly enjoyed this EP, and Barbie stayed in heavy rotation. He's dropped a couple Lucy's on YouTube too, just like the old days, that really keep that 454 energy, including the aptly titled Thames sampling song Thames Flip and the Aaliyah homage 1 in a Million. The 1 in a Million video is in Japan, and it looks like he's having a lot of fun. He's clearly living good. He also DJs under the name Gatorface, doing sets in New York, and even doing one of those cool elevator music videos. He has a monthly radio show on NTS called Florida Man FM. It's not too hard to catch him somewhere doing something cool and creative. And if you missed him on tour, you can always hop on Instagram and catch him doing some crazy skate tricks. When I pick artists for this series, I'm leaning towards picking artists who remind me the most of why I want to create. Anytime I hear a cool song, it makes me want to make music. But with 454, it's deeper than that. When I see the way he does his visuals, the way he does his merch, and the way he runs his life in general, not only does it make me want to create, but it makes me want to see my friends more, go outside, go for long drives, and skate. And when I dive a little deeper into his music, and I think about the way he's pushed past the tragedies in his life to have such a thoroughly positive, if sometimes guarded, message in his music, it inspires me to keep my head up at times when things get hard. And shit gets hard sometimes. So anytime I feel like I need a little bit of that Florida sunshine, colored with that particular Nintendo shade that'll always make me feel like a little kid again, I'm cutting on Fast Tracks 3. And your favorite artist probably is too.